So, how's it going, everyone? Have you all revised till now what we have done? Professional ethics, tax audit test. Everyone gave the test for tax audit.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
Iris and others. Mehak, Nupur, Avija, Kapil, Rupali, Sagar.
सर 2-3 क्वेश्चन बस बाकी हैं किसी काम के कारण बस नहीं हो पाया एक्चुअली
So you don't have to give the test in parts. You have to sit for like you are sitting for the exam and give it all at once. ठीक है?
यस
Think
सर इट
of
वोंट
it
हैव
like
बीन
an exam only. Think of it like an exam. Consider it like what you would have done in your exam. You would sit like sitting in an exam, having that kind of heat, feel that pressure, and then accordingly do not see or try to see the chapters, or again in between the test do not try to go through any such sort of answers. As I told, just think of it like pure exams. So we'll discuss the test tomorrow morning. We'll start with now peer review. So you can come to chapter 17 peer review 338. So chapter 17 peer review and quality review. Peer review and quality review. So we'll start with peer review. I'll start first by telling you what the weightage, peer review and quality review, what is the difference between them, and then we'll start with peer review. Okay? That is how we are gonna spend our Sunday evening. So everyone had spent their Sunday, I guess, or I think I ruined your Sunday plans. So let's start peer review and quality review. The weightage is around 4 to 5 marks. The weightage is around 4 to 5 marks. In my attempt, 10 marks MCQ came. Straight away, one case study came, which consisted of 5 questions of 2 marks each. That means peer review 10 mark question came directly. No option, you have to attempt. Correct? And then in this attempt, just this attempt, May 23, 2 questions came from this chapter. 2 questions came from this chapter, 4 or 5 marks. So that shows the chapter's importance, right? Peer review, quality review chapter is very important. Peer review is substantially amended, and same goes for quality review, which was amended substantially 2 3 attempts before. Um, Not 2 3 attempts, but yeah, after my, yeah, I mean you could say July 21 onwards. So it was amended from July 21 onwards very much, and therefore we need to also consider quality review chapter as important as well. Do not think of leaving the quality review chapter. I know it might pop up in your mind. It will pop up in your mind that okay, let's leave this, but there you have to control yourself. You have to revise. You have to go through the chapter again. So peer review and quality review. I told you already what is peer review. Do you remember peer review? Peers. Review done by your peers, right? Review done by your. So peer review I told you earlier as well. What was that? Review done by your peers, correct? So similarly, who are your peers? Your chartered accountants, your other firms of chartered accountant. They will do the review of your firm. What will they review? They will simply review what? That whether you are properly following the policies and procedures that need to be followed, whether you are simply documenting all the audit procedures. Documentation is done in accordance with SA 230. Standards on quality control standards is being maintained, properly followed or not, right? So all this is to be reviewed by your peer firms. Similarly, in quality review, what they want you to review is that whether you have defalcated, or as a chartered accountancy firm, whether are you not complying with the policies and procedure, are you not following the compliances, are you not following the laws and regulation that needs to be followed. So all these things in the quality review they will do. But the difference here comes that in the peer review, the mentality, the aim is not to find out deficiencies. The aim is towards improvement of your procedures. The aim is towards improvement of your systems in your CFM, improvement of the systems or improvement procedure, but not to find out the deficiencies. We are not here to find out the deficiencies and report. But in the quality review, they are specifically employed to find out the deficiencies. So quality review is generally you will see that it is done on a large scale manner where the firm is huge, and there has been a circumstance where they have found that, okay, suppose example, they found a company, a listed company, or any company which they found that there is a fraud that has happened, right? And therefore they got to know that, okay, this fraud could have easily been detected by the auditor. So then they did what? They simply selected that auditor for quality review, and they will do the review. That will be selected by whom? Quality review board. Similarly, peer review is done by whom? Peer review board. Peer review board, quality review board. You can simply imagine the difference between the both by considering the constitution of both these board. Peer review board is constituted by ICAI. Peer review board is constituted by ICI. Quality review board is constituted by central government. Are you getting this? The difference, you can imagine how much difference could it be, right? So there the aim is towards finding out the deficiencies, why there was such a non-compliance, why they could not detect the fraud of this company. That is why they will be doing what? Quality review, quality of the firm's procedures and planning with respect to that specific audit. And also they can pick up few other audits. But here in the peer review process, they will simply pick up few audits from the sample out of all the audits that they have done, and they will simply start seeing that whether the audit was conducted in accordance with standards on auditing or not, whether all the professional standards were followed or not, ethical standards were maintained, code of conduct, all the schedules that we saw, and similarly all the other technical standards like standards on auditing, accounting standards, all this has to be followed, or whether they are followed or not. So this is called what? Professional, ethical, or technical standard, PET. That is what their aim is to. So you can see the difference, the peer review board and quality review board. Peer review done by PRB, quality review done by QRB, is constituted by central government. Here PRB is constituted by ICI. The aim is different. Aim is here to not to quantify or not to aim at the finding out deficiencies. The aim is towards improvement of the society. However, quality review is done towards finding out the deficiencies. So introduction, you can just see this peer means what? Peer review, you can see the definition of peer review. It is a somewhat a bit just one thing is included, and that is what is amendment is. So peer review means an examination and review of the systems and procedures. So what is the peer review? Process is to do examination and review of the system and procedures to determine whether the same have been put in place by the PU, practicing unit PU. Who is the practicing unit? Who is PU? Practicing unit PU is nothing but our CA firm. Practicing unit PU is the CA firm for ensuring what? Quality of assurance services as envisaged by the other standards, that is your professional standard, ethical standard, and technical standard, PET. Professional standard, ethical standard, technical standard. That means what these standards require you to do, they will just simply come, examine, and review whether you have followed this PET or not. And also including audit quality maturity model, AQMM is the amendment which they have inserted in the definition of peer review, in the objective of the peer review, in the scope of the peer review. So everywhere AQMM is now to be seen by the peer reviewer. So what is this AQMM, audit quality maturity model? Is nothing but a matrix where CA firm, they have to self assess accordingly whether they are following all the code of ethics, whether they are doing the audit in accordance with essays, whether they are documenting all the procedures in accordance with SA 230. So everything, chartered accountant firm will itself self assess itself and rate accordingly based on the matrix, that is audit quality maturity model. Right? Based on the audit quality maturity model, they will rate themselves, and as a peer reviewer you will see whether they have rated accordingly or not. What is the score of the AQMM? Is it exceeding the limit? Is it breaching the limit? Or is it within the range? Is it confined at what they have arrived at AQMM, or that they have exaggerated the same? So this AQMM has to be now reviewed also by the peer reviewer, also to be reviewed by the peer reviewer along with the examination of your PETs. AQMM. One thing important to be also noted here is that this AQMM, you cannot, if at all, let's suppose your score is very good for AQMM, you cannot simply tell in your write-ups or in any sort of advertisement or any sort of publicity that your AQMM score is very good, standing at 1, standing at whatever the score is. So AQMM score you cannot tell, because you will be held guilty under which clause if you are doing this publicity sort of or soliciting based on AQMM, you will be held guilty under clause 6 part 1 schedule 1. Correct? Clause 6 part 1 and schedule 1. So this is your peer review definition. And then on fulfilling the qualification prescribed for a reviewer, as per guideline 26 of these guidelines. So this statement, there was earlier, there was a peer review statement, which is now been what converted into peer review guidelines, and that is why there is now few changes in the guidelines that we will see. Peer review guidelines. So peer review guidelines, do you remember or do you know whether the guidelines are to be followed mandatorily or not? These guidelines, do you remember there is a difference between circulars versus guidelines? Guidelines, are we required to follow it mandatorily, yes or no?
It's not mandatory to follow,
Not
but it
mandatory,
is
sir.
It's not mandatory but is recommendatory, right? It is recommendatory to follow guidelines, not mandatory. However, institute had strictly told that if not followed the guidelines of this council that they have issued, that is what peer review guidelines 2022, if not followed, you will be held guilty. You can think of where you will be held guilty, where, in which clause, can you think of it? In which schedule, in which part, in which clause, if you are not following the guidelines of the council? Yes, if you're not following the guidelines of the council, if you're not following the provisions of the Chartered Accountant Acts, regulations, guidelines, you are held guilty under
Schedule 2, Clause 1, Part 2,
Schedule 2, Part 2, Clause 1, right?
Clause 1.
So you'll be held guilty under Schedule 2, Part 2, Clause 1. That is what they are also saying in the notes. You can just simply refer to last note wala point. Note, they say what shall be deemed to be guideline of the council. That means what? This peer review guideline is deemed to be the guideline issued by the council, and whatever guideline is issued by the council, if not followed, then you will be held guilty under Schedule 2, Part 2, Clause 1. Still not able to recall all the parts, all the schedule, all the clause number. Why so? You have to revise. So test is day after tomorrow. Do remember that and have to perform really well. And please do not give wrong false number. Okay? At least try to reciprocate what the clause number is, because those are being given 1 mark for each clause number that you mentioned correctly. They've given in correct, strictly they've given in the answer checking guidelines that yes, 1 mark is for giving this 1 mark for giving the clause number, correct part number and correct schedule number. So 1 mark is for that, 1 mark is for writing the language, and then for your analysis, and then lastly 1 mark for conclusion. So see here, branch peer reviewer is nothing but so more or less same as peer reviewer, normal or peer reviewer. That means the qualification what is required, or anything that is requirement for him to become a branch peer reviewer, same as our normal peer reviewer, just that he will be doing the peer review of the branch. Our CA firm is, suppose I told you what Raipur is our HO peer reviewer. Our CA firm office, main office is in Raipur, and suppose our branch is in other city, Nagpur. That means what? Here the branch peer reviewer, the one peer reviewer could be appointed for reviewing this head office, and another peer reviewer could be appointed for appointing for reviewing the office at Nagpur. So the reviewer which is appointed for Nagpur office will be called what? Branch reviewer. That is as simple as that. And then this concept is newly being inserted. Branch reviewer is also newly inserted section, but is not that much relevant. But new unit is very very important. So who do you think will bear the expense when the peer review is done? Just tell me. If suppose I am a CA firm, my peer review is being done, who will bear the expense of this? Because anyway, that the firm who is doing my peer review, the firm who is coming to do my peer review, have to be paid, who will pay this peer review? Peer reviewer. Who will pay the peer reviewer? Who is gonna bear the expenses?
Review board?
No, reviewer will get the remuneration, right, for doing the review. But the firm whose review is being done, that means me, practicing unit, PU, practicing unit जिसका review हो रहा है, PU, वो bear करेगी ना. Practicing unit, the firm whose review is being done will bear the expenses. So don't you think it will be a harsh on new unit which is just established? I've just taken COP. I just started my proprietorship firm. Did nothing much. Did nothing but but there is not as such requirement to be done as such a review on my firm, but it would be a requirement by the institute, then it would be a bit harsh regulation on me. So that is why they have come up with the new unit concept, where they tell what, if after incorporation of your firm it is not exceeding 1 year, it is not exceeding 1 year from the incorporation of your firm, or even if it is incorporate, even if it exceeds more than 1 year after incorporation, but you have till now not conducted any assurance services, but you have not till now not rendered any assurance services to your clients, then your review will not be done, then your peer review requirement is not applicable to your firm. That means your firm, that means practicing unit will not be required to do what, review of their firm. So I'll just simply tell you again what that means. A firm whose date of establishment is less than 12 months immediately preceding the date of receipt of application of the peer review, and which may or may not have any rendered any assurance services. Mark this important, assurance services. Anyway, I might be engaged in suppose tax representation services. I'll be fighting on my behalf of the client. I'll be representing myself as a chartered accountant in income tax department, but that is not assurance services. Peer review is specifically done only and only of assurance services. If they are picking any file that they want to review, reviewer is coming and picking up any file that they want to review, they can review only and only assurance services that I have rendered. They cannot come and pick my taxation services, they cannot come and pick up any service which is other than assurance service. And you are already know what are assurance services. We are expressing where you are expressing your opinion, right? Where you are trying to tell the readers of the shareholders or readers of the financial statements or any such sort of report or certificate readers, that yes, what do you infer out of this set of documents, what do you infer, what your expression of opinion is. So that is assurance services, where you assure someone else, right? So peer review can be done and done only for assurance services. That means what, if after incorporation it is not exceeding 1 year, then also peer review is not required. And even if it exceeds 1 year but till now you haven't rendered any sort of assurance services, then also peer review is not required. Are we clear with this new unit concept? It's important. Now simply come to peer review of auditors. What they want us to tell is significance of peer review. What is the significance of peer review? So first of all, they tell us that when the reviewer comes to practicing unit's office, it is not like their work is hampered. It is not like the work of practicing unit will get hampered because of the review being performed in their CA firm. So it says that one does not get disturbed while doing the work because of the peer review. It is not like your work will get hampered. Secondly, the business environment is so dynamic, right? So your audit policies, your audit methodologies, your audit tools that you are using might go outdated. Therefore, when the review is being done in your firm, they would be able to assess whether your audit methodologies, tools, audit mechanics, or again audit mechanisms that you are using is appropriate in the given current circumstances or not, right? So business environment is fastly changing, dynamic, and therefore review is being helpful to assess whether your technology or audit methodologies or tools are outdated or not. Clear? And thirdly, it would be if the work of any auditor is questioned, then you can defend yourself that no, my review is being done. My firm is already being done, peer reviewed. My firm is already being reviewed by a peer reviewer, and therefore they have already communicated all the deficiencies that they would have find. Apart from these deficiencies, there are no such other deficiencies. There could not be any other such deficiencies. It's not very 100% sure, but that is just a reasonable assurance which is being provided by the peer reviewer. So you can defend yourself. First line of defense would be that the work has happened as per the audit practice, normal standards on audit only. Please do not worry. So again, 3 points for significance of peer review. Work does not get hampered. There is no hamperance of the work. Similarly, the business environment is fastly changing, very dynamic, and therefore to improve your audit techniques and methodologies, review is important. And thirdly, your work cannot be questioned by any third person since you are being peer reviewed. So they would also think of it twice before asking any question on your form. They'll think twice. Clear? So it acts as a first line of defense. That is what the significance of peer review is. Now let's come to objectives of peer review. Objectives of peer review. Now I told you the peer review, the first objective is to see and check and review and examine whether all the professional standard, ethical standard, technical standard is being complied with or not, right? Do you remember the definition? Whether all the PET is complied or not. Secondly, proper system of documentation. That was our another objective, whether the documentation is done in accordance with SA 230 or not. Similarly, primary objective is not to find out the deficiency. I told you, to find out the deficiency, the primary objective is not to find out the deficiencies, but to improve upon your system and procedures, right? The primary objective of quality review is to find out the deficiencies. It's not the primary objective of peer review. However, what do you think if you are finding a lot many deficiencies? If the peer reviewer is finding lot many deficiencies, then whether they will report this to institute or not, right? They will report, correct or not? Then the key objective of peer review exercise is not to identify isolated cases of engagement failure, or not to identify the weaknesses in isolation, but they want to identify the weaknesses if aggregated could be material, and therefore then they will try to report the same to the institute. But to identify weaknesses that are pervasive in nature, that are chronic in nature, if combined with other weaknesses, those weaknesses can be chronic in nature, could be dangerous, very dangerous, or very much pervasive. That means they are flowing through entirely within the entity, flowing within the entity entirely in its entirety. So can be a pervasive weakness, can be a chronic nature of weakness, and therefore in that case, of course you will have to report. It's not like you can't disclose any deficiencies. If you are coming across any sort of deficiency, yes, then you can disclose. But our aim is not to identify deficiency. Our aim is what? Aim is to improve upon the resources or improve upon the systems. Correct? Everyone clear? First 3 points. What was the first point? PET, simple. PET, second, documentation. Thirdly, not to identify any sort of deficiencies, but to improve upon the system. And then fourthly, when you identify such mistakes, such deficiencies which are chronic in nature, which are pervasive in nature, there you might need to report it to the institute. And lastly, six, to identify and address patterns of non-compliance with quality control standards. So wherever there are quality control standards, for example, SQC1, definitely this SQC1 will be tested by the reviewer. Definitely they will try to assess whether the SQC1 process, policies, procedure along with SA 220, SA 220 is being followed or not. In case of auditing services, SA 220 will also be seen, and in case of all the other types of services, SQC1 will also be seen. Clear? Quality control standards. 6, to identify and address pattern of non-compliance with quality control standards. So again, if we come across 5 points, objectives of the peer reviewer was to, first was to comply with PET. Second was to do proper system of documentation to be implemented. Thirdly, to find out those deficiencies to improve upon the quality of services rendered by the professions. Then fourthly, it was not to identify isolated weaknesses, but to identify weaknesses which are chronic in nature, right? And fifthly, it was what? To seek to identify or address the pattern of non-compliance with QCS, quality control standards. Everyone comfortable till now? Or any doubt? It's very much simple only. Just have to retain the stuffs. Till now, what we have learned? Definition of new unit, and then the peer review guidelines is as cool as same as guidelines issued by the council. And if you know that if you do not follow the guidelines which is issued by the council, then you will be held guilty under schedule 2 part 2 clause 1. You should start writing here only, guideline not followed, guilty, schedule 2 part 2 clause 1. Wherever I am linking some place or with these other place, then you should also try to link, or even if at least try writing the same, because you may not be able to link again when on your first revision. So just at least try to write it just before the concept, just beside the concept. So we are done with objectives as well. The scope of peer review. Scope of peer review, that means if the reviewer is coming, how much he will check, what will be his scope of review, what will be the focus of his peer review, that we will see now. The scope of peer review is to check whether the CA firm with which the practicing unit, PU, the CA firm whose review is being done, practicing unit, is complying with all the professional, ethical, technical standards or not. Secondly, we have to see whether the compliance of all the direction or guideline which has been issued by the council or not. Thirdly, the training programs should be done. Training programs, That means where there is any sort of amendment, updates, or any sort of new changes, then though a training program should also be done for the staff, and there should be enough infrastructure available. It should not happen like that two articles are fighting for same system, or client is not getting sofa to sit, right? So proper infrastructure is there or not, that also you'll have to review. And then this compliance with the direction or guideline वाला point जो है ना, compliance with what direction or guideline issued by the council, you have to split this point into two separate points, two different points. See, suppose first point is this, what compliance with PT. Second point is compliance by the council, issued by the council, compliance of direction or guideline which is issued by the council with respect to members. They will issue guidelines for members, they will issue guidelines for articles also, right? So you'll have to check both. While when you are coming for peer review, you'll have to check whether they are complying with the guidelines issued to members, and thirdly they will also have to check guidelines issued to article assistant. And what all guideline can be issued to article assistant, you already remember, right? We studied in schedule 2 part 2, uh, schedule 2 part 2, where we were studying what, part 2 clause 1, that is guilty of professional misconduct in case you are not complying with the chartered accountancy act regulations or any such of guidelines issued there under, right? So there you will be held guilty, because if article is not complying with the registered work or registered diary, stipend payments is not being done on a regular basis. Do you remember this point? Stipend payment or done with interest on late payment, then you will be held guilty, because it has to be done mandatorily monthly only. So all this, these all are what, 3 points. We'll start by forgetting again. This is my first point. Second point is compliance with the direction or guideline issued to members with respect to the engagements which you have accepted during the year, engagement which you have completed during the year. All this has to be documented. And then thirdly, compliance of direction or guideline issued to article assistant, audit assistants. Clear? 3 points. Then of course this was a very easy point, that is training program has to be followed for all the staffs, and also you ought to have what, adequate infrastructure and system and procedure for carrying out services. That means your system, what is the system level of system, whether is it outdated or is it amended, whether is it up to date or not, right? So you will have to check the systems or procedures. And lastly, quality of reporting, that means what, you have to check whether SA 700 series is being complied with or not. Reporting is done in accordance with SA 700. Similarly, this point which they have inserted in the definition, they've also inserted the same in the scope of your review as well. That means what, now when you are going for the peer review of your peer firms, you will have to check AQMM, audit quality maturity model. Clear? Are we clear? So just go through once again till now what we have done. Till now we have done 3 questions, more or less. Significance of peer review, objective, what is the objective of peer review, and the scope of peer review. Just quickly go through all these 3 questions once again. I want you to start mugging up these in the class itself. Just go through this 3 section, 3 answer once again. Done or not done? Done or done? Done. Now come to PET. What is PET? PET.
Professional, ethical, technical standards.
Right. So what do you think can be considered as technical standards? Yes. So what do you think can be considered in technical standards? Technical standards. Standards on auditing, accounting standards, all these statements that is being issued by the institute, right? Guidelines that is being issued by the institute. They issue so many guidelines with respect to tax audit, guidelines for caro. Similarly, this peer review guidelines. So all this can be considered as what, technical standards. Similarly, there are so many ethical standards. Just now we come through what, professional ethics chapter. There are so many professional standards, ethical standards, code of ethics, right? 5 principles of code of conduct, code of ethics. So these are all what, PET, professional ethical and technical standards. So we'll try to recollect all this. First is with respect to accounting standards. We got 3 points with respect to accounting standards. First is normal as accounting standard issued for entities other than companies. So if you remember, there are accounting standard which is issued for the entities who are not companies, and also specifically for entities who are companies. Accounting standard issued for companies, which is being issued under section 133, prescribed under section 133 of the Companies Act. Similarly, there is one more section, and that rule actually prescribes what? AS. Similarly, one rule also prescribes Ind AS. So Ind AS prescribed under section 133. 133 read with rule read with Company India's Rules 2015. Read with Company India's Rules 2015. So these are 3 points with respect to what? Accounting standards. Then standards on auditing issued by ICI, including EQC, SQC, statements, all sort of statements, guidance notes. So many guidance notes being issued by ICI. Just now I told you what? With respect to, suppose example, guidance note issued on tax audit, guidance note on CARO. We we've also see so many guidelines, guidance note issued on tax audit, on the tax audit chapter. So many guidance being issued by the institute. Similarly, all the guideline, notification, direction, all these are what? Standards on internal audit. We have to study two standards on internal audit, two SIA. We will study in internal audit chapter. There is being separately list of standards issued by institute on internal audit, just like what they have issued in normal or assurance audit. Standards on audit, SASs. Similarly, they have issued in on internal audit as well. And then your framework with respect to preparation of financial statement and presentation of financial statement. And lastly, with respect to provisions of the relevant statute, rules, regulation, including in the guidelines, notification, direction issued by regulatory bodies. So this is nothing but your PETs. There could be any other sort of PET as well, or other standard which may be issued by the authority governing or profession of chartered accountancy. Are we clear till now? So let's now come to assurance engagement. Very, very important. Assurance engagement. What do you mean by assurance engagement? What do you mean by engagement which are not assurance engagement? Correct. So I'll tell you one story. I'll tell you one story. Or instead, what we can do first is what? Just go through the points which are not included in the assurance services. Let's go through them, and then we'll try to learn the same through a story. So assurance services are used interchangeably with audit services, attestation functions, and audit functions, right? Quite the same. It is quite same. That is audit functions or assurance function, assurance service or audit service provided. But it will not include these services. And specifically, these are not exhaustive list. This is not exhaustive list. They have specifically mentioned here in last point, new amendment, that anything which is not an assurance service will be called as non-assurance service. Anything which is not an assurance service will be called as non-assurance service, and institute has defined what all services are assurance services. Are you getting this? So anything which is not an assurance service is called as non-assurance service, that they have inserted recently. Any other service rendered or functions performed by a practitioner not prescribed by the council to be called as what? Assurance engagement. It will be included where? It will be included here. That means non-assurance services. This list relates to what? Non-assurance services. So you can simply see, if you are providing your opinion on whether the accounting standard is applicable or not, or whether any sort of other standard is applicable to the client or not. Similarly, compilation of financial statement, you are just simply compiling the financial statement of the entity. Thirdly, you are preparing or compiling any other information other than financial statements. Clear? All these services. Similarly, engages to prepare tax return, taxation services that you are providing. These are also what? Non-assurance services. Any sort of representation service that you are providing in front of tax authorities. And lastly, your MCS. MCS. What was your section for management consultancy service, which is being allowed under professional ethics under Chartered Accountants Act 1949? Yes, section number management consultancy services. This is the exam question for May 23.
224, section 2, class 2, subclass 4.
Section 2, clause 2, subclause 4. 224. Don't you remember 224? Correct. So management consultancy service, testifying yourself as an expert witness or engaged in any sort of due diligence. Engage in any sort of due diligence. So all these are what? Non-assurance services. All these are non-assurance services. If you are providing these services, or you cannot simply do peer review of these services. I told you why we cannot do peer review of these services, because peer review can be done and done only for assurance services, right? Peer review can be done only for assurance services. You can pick up the files of which the firm PU has provided assurance services. If the PU has provided all these services, then you cannot pick any of these files for your review. For you to review the peer review, for you to review the practicing unit, you cannot pick up all these services for you, for your peer review. Clear? Now let's just try to learn this. I'll tell you one story. That is my love story, one-sided love story. So there was this man that came in my office one time, and she came with her daughter. She came with his daughter, and she asked that, sir, please tell me whether the AS will be applicable on my business or not. Which AS will be applicable, or what sort of environment am I into? What sort of AS is applicable of certain laws, what sort of laws are applicable to my entity or my business? So I simply told him that all these accounting standards will be applied to you, all these laws will be applied to you. So he was mighty impressed by me. He was quite impressed by me, and therefore he gave me the service to compile the financial statements. He gave me the service to compile the financial statement as well. So I told him that okay, I'll do the compilation of financial statement, but next time onwards, please you do not come. Instead, send your daughter only. I'll compile the financial statement. Please send your daughter only, right? So then what I did, what I compiled the financial statements, and now the daughter was impressed. Since I compiled the financial statement very beautifully, very thought provokingly, and therefore now she was very satisfied with this such compilation. She was asking whether I do any other sort of compilation as well. So I just told him that yeah, I also sort of compile the hearts. Our hearts can be compiled, and therefore she was asking whether whether can you compile any sort of other information as well other than financial statement. So I told her yes, I can compile, but she was very angry with this sort of comment, and then she told me simply that, have you seen yourself? Where is my father and where are you? Right? The income that you are having income, the same amount of tax my father is paying, the amount of income that you are earning. So then I did what? Out of the revenge, I filed the tax return of the father. I filed the tax return of the father manipulatively, falsely, so that I will also get what? Tax representation services. I will try to represent himself in front of tax authorities and try to prove him false, that no, his income is not that much, or any sort of those thing that I need to now prove myself, or it was now on my ego, right? So now her daughter came to know, and now she now quickly got to know that yes, before appointing any sort of chartered accountant, I need to give myself one management consultant, which who will tell me what, who should be my expert, and with all such of due diligence only now she will be appointing the chartered accountant. Clear? So might be we have covered all the points. Accounting standard, if you can just go through one story again. Accounting standard, he came for accounting standards. I gave him the advice, so he was mighty impressed. He also then gave me the service to compile the financial statement. I compiled that. So then I told him that next time onwards, please do not come, send your daughter only. And I then compiled the financial statement with the daughter. She was also impressed. She asked me, can you compile any other than financial statement? Can you compile anything other than financial statement? So I told her what I can compile, and she was then angry. Then I provided tax return services. Tax return services, I manipulatively filed wrong returns, and therefore, so that I can get what? I can get to represent my authority, I can get to represent him before tax authorities. And lastly, she came to know, so now she go to all the chartered accountant, she appoint with due diligence only expert she will appoint, and the management consultancy service with that only she will now appoint. And also do not forget to include this last point, which is an amendment, that any other sort of service which is rendered and that is not an assurance service, that will also be included under non-assurance services. Okay? And this question came in May 23, this attempt. Exactly the same question. that the chartered accountant is providing management consultancy services, peer reviewer came and wanted to review this management consultancy service. Can he do so? Can he do so? This is the question exactly that came in this attempt. Areas which are outside the scope of peer review. Clear till now? Yes or no? So now let's come to applicability of peer review to practicing units. Now that peer review has to be followed by all the practicing units should get themselves what peer reviewed, but what institute saw that not all firms are getting peer reviewed. Not all the firms are getting peer reviewed. So even you might be aware about the fact that most of your firms that you are aware about might not be getting themselves peer reviewed, right? So what now institute has come up with an idea that now they will have to get them mandatorily peer reviewed in order to render the services. So this by this way they are now making the applicability of the peer review in such a manner that peer review has to be followed, or peer review provisions or peer review has to be done by all the practicing unit if they want to provide these services. But the institute is not applying this at once but in a phase wise manner. So from 1st April 2022 you will see that all the practicing units which are doing the audit of listed entity have to do the peer review, get themselves peer reviewed, and need to have the peer review certificate before they can accept the audit of all the listed entities. Similarly, from 1st April 2023, that means already started, you see these firms who are auditing the unlisted public company having this much threshold have to get themselves peer reviewed. Similarly, other firms who are having 5 or more partners have to get themselves peer reviewed before they can accept the audit. And even at the time of issuing the audit report, they need to have what peer review certificate. Similarly, from 1st April 2024, these entities who has raised funds from public banks or financial institution for 50 crore or more, or any sort of practicing unit which is having 4 or more partners need to have what peer review certificate before acceptance of any sort of auditing or assurance services or before issuing the report. And similarly, from 1st April 2025, all practicing unit, if you want to do the audit of public sector banks, or if you are having 3 or more partners, then you'll have to get yourself peer review. So in a way, institute is mandatorily trying to get all the practicing units to come under the purview of peer review in a phase wise manner. Clear? The provision with respect to applicability was earlier different. That was divided into 3 levels: level 1, level 2, level 3. And that was again amended and was divided into 2 levels: level 1 and level 2. And now that institute has again come up with certain different criteria for PUs to get themselves peer reviewed. In order to each and every firm should get themselves peer reviewed, they have come up with peer review guidelines 2022. So this is important. This will or might come very, very important. This is just the amendment from May 2023 and they have not asked this till now. So let's just see mandatory. Peer review could be mandatory. Just now what we saw, peer review would be mandatory from 1st April 2022, 23, 24, 25 based on the criteria. Similarly, you could also opt for voluntary peer review if you want your firm to get yourself peer reviewed so that you are having good reputation in front of your clients or in front of any other firms. Then you can also get yourself peer reviewed voluntarily. Similarly, special case peer review can also happen where on application issued by or on an application by RBI or any regulatory authorities or by the council or any sort of person, peer review board finds your practicing unit fit for the peer review. That means peer review board finds that yes, your practicing unit needs your peer review, then they can also issue the special case peer review. That means they will try to mandatorily tell your firm that you need to get yourself peer review. So phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, this you have to.
So please repeat the last point.
Special case peer review is nothing but where the board on an specific information that they have received from suppose RBI or from suppose director discipline or from suppose board of discipline. Do you remember DC disciplinary committee, BOD, that they got to know that you have committed any sort of misconduct? Then they could also apply to what peer review board to tell that this institute requires peer review. They have not conducted with the peer review, although the requirement is not there, mandatory requirement is not there, but they can apply to the peer review board and tell your firm to get yourself peer review. Then this what is last case, special case. On an application, specific information received from Secretary ICI or Disciplinary Directorate or any other sort of regulator, example RBI, or in the opinion of board. Board means here what? Here mean board here means what?
Review board.
Peer review board, right? So in the opinion of peer review board requires the special peer review of the practicing unit, then they can conduct special peer review of such practicing unit. Clear?
Yes, sir.
So let's try to sum up this phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. Phase 1, this I have already told you. Do you remember this? In professional ethics, this I have already told you. I want the clause number. Under which clause we have seen this? I also told at that time also that you will tend to forget. Clause number, where we have already studied this point, that if you are auditing a listed entity, then you need to have a peer review certificate before acceptance of the audit. Bolo, bolo, bolo. No. Schedule 2, part 1, clause 9. Just check there and write here also and write there also. I told you that you will forget. I even give an example where I talked with AIR2 and he also gave wrong answer. May 22 question. This is May 22 question. 95% of the student went with LODR chapter or any sort of company audit chapter, because the question came is that you are being appointed as an auditor of listed company. The first line was this auditor of listed company, and then they gave what? Peer review, that you are not being get yourself firm, the firm is not having peer review certificate. So under which clause you will be held guilty? Schedule 2 part 1 clause 9. Then phase 2, 1st April 2023, is where you are conducting a statutory audit of unlisted public company, not listed. Here now comes what? Unlisted public company having paid up share capital of more than equal to 500 crore, having turnover more than equal to 1000 crore, or having loans and borrowings more than equal to 500 crore. So loans and borrowings or paid up share capital exceeding 500 crores or turnover more than equal to 1000 crore. Paid up share capital more than equal to 500 crore, borrowings, loans on borrowings more than equal to 500 crore, and turnover more than equal to 1000 crore. Just remember this limit. This limit is same as it is. As it is limit, we will study one more place. I'll tell you when. And I'll also ask you where we have studied the same limits. Again, I'll ask. So try to remember this. What? Paid up share capital more than equal to 500 crore or borrowings, loans more than equal to 500 crore or turnover more than equal to 1000 crores. This sort of public unlisted company, if you are doing the audit of this company, then you need to have peer review certificate before acceptance of the audit and also at the time of issuance of the audit report. Clear? Similarly, if you are having 5 or more partners in your PU, in your practicing unit, in your firm, you are having 5 or more partners. Clear? Now, 1st April 2024, if you are raising funds from public or banks or financial institution over 50 crores, you are doing audit of any entity and that entity is raising funds from public, raising funds from bank or raising funds from any financial institution more than equal to 50 crores, 50 crores. Then if you are doing the audit of that entity, then you need to have a peer review certificate at the time of acceptance of the audit and also at the time of issuance of audit report. Clear? And then lastly, 1st April 2025, you are doing the audit of public sector bank, PSB branch audit. These branch audits come na, SBI branch audit in the month of April. Do you remember this? In the month of April, you are going for all the branch audits, bank branch audits. For day or two, you are covering one branch. So this branch audit, if you want to do, then you need to have what? Peer review certificate. Or having 3 or more partners. Then also you'll need to have your firm get peer reviewed. Clear? Applicability wise, applicability very important. This can come, I am telling you again, and this already came. So are you getting this? The kind of story that we built up around here, would easily help you fetch what? 5 marks or 4 marks. You could easily recall this, right? Peer review board constitution.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, ये peer review certificate validity.
Peer review chapter.
Peer review certificate. What is the validity of peer review certificate?
What is the benefit of peer review certificate?
Like if we are going through the validity, sir.
Just
We
wait.
are. It's,
You're asking about validity of peer review certificate.
yes, sir.
Validities can be up to institute council that is issuing the peer, that is up to the peer review board that is issuing the certificate, but it cannot exceed 3 years. It cannot exceed for more than 3 years. Peer review certificate validity. So peer review board, I already told you constitution of peer review board. Peer review board is constituted by
ICAI.
ICAI, Council of ICAI. Composition will see there is just simple single amendment here. Earlier they have mentioned that composition wise you could have maximum 12 members in your peer review board. In the board you can have maximum 12 members. Now they have also inserted that minimum to minimum you need to have 6 members anytime. Minimum to minimum you need to have 6 members. So minimum 6, maximum 12, and more than equal to 50% shall be from council members. Who are the council members? You must be knowing, right? CCMs. CCMs are what? Central council members. CCMs. You must have heard of this, right? CCMs, central council members. So what they are telling that out of the all the members that is there in peer review board, out of all the members that they are in peer review board, at least 50%, shall be from amongst the council members. The council will only be appointing what? Chairperson and vice chairperson from amongst its elected council members appointed on the board. So I'll just simply ask you one question. If suppose currently there are 10 members in PRB, then how much should be from the council, ICI ki council? How much should be coming out of ICI council? Minimum
6. 5.
5 na? At least more than equal to 50%. At least more than equal to this. So 5 should be coming out of these council members. So these five are supposed from ICI council, and rest other 5 are supposed from other institutions. Suppose one is from director of RBI, or one is coming from economics department, law department, ministry of law department. So all these other 5 are different, and these 5 are from council. Now what do you think, who can be CP or vice chairperson? Can they come out of this set of 5%, or can they come from this set of 5%, or they can come from either of the above?
Sir, the above one.
That means from the council members only. That means the council members which have been elected, they can only be appointed as chairperson or vice chairperson of the peer review board. Clear? Then tenure of members, tenure could for the two-third of these members. So how much is the two-third for 10?
7.
7, right? So at least for the two-third of the members, the tenure will be how much? 3 years or term end of the council membership. 3 years or the term end of the council membership, whichever is earlier. That means what? Suppose these five, they have now been not appointed as a council member themselves. That means what? Their council membership has come to an end. So can they be peer review board member? No, because they have been appointed in the peer review board because they were council members. Since they were council members, they were appointed in the peer review board. But if suppose they are not no more they are no more council members, then will they be in the peer review board? No. That is why their tenure will be how much? For the two-third of the member, tenure will be either 3 years or term end of the council membership, whichever is earlier. And for the remaining one third, the tenure could be as decided by the PRB for remaining one third. And they are also saying what chairperson and vice chairperson of the board may be rotated every year by the council of the institute. So 1 year this person could be chairperson and this person could be vice chairperson. Second year this person could be chairperson, this person could be vice chairperson. Third year again this person could be chairperson and this person could be vice chairperson. So getting this, these all can be rotated yearly, annually they can be rotated, vice chairperson and chairperson. In case of casual vacancy, it has to be filled by the council of the institute. Who all cannot be the members in PRB? So if you are already a member in board of discipline, or if you are already a member in disciplinary committee, if you are already member there, then you cannot be member of the peer review board. Just remember this, because then there would be a independence breach. Conflict of interest may arise. Correct. And quorum is nothing but the quorum of meetings of the PRB as well as procedure for transaction of business shall be governed by the Chartered Accountants Regulation 1988. So you need not worry about the quorum. They have not mentioned specifically. They want you to refer to this regulation. But yeah, anyway, they have not mentioned. They had mentioned earlier, but in the peer review guidelines 2022, they have not mentioned. So we are cool. We don't need to mug up the quorum. Person who all are disqualified, who are the members of BOD or DC, who are all the members of BOD or DC. Similarly, tenure will be for the two-third. For this 7 persons, the membership will be either 3 years or term end of the council membership, whichever is earlier, Term end of the council membership, whichever is earlier. However, for other three, the term end or the tenure would be as may be done or as may be instructed by the PRB. Clear? Now, eligibility to be a peer reviewer. Who all can be peer reviewer? For you to become a peer reviewer, you need to be a practicing member of the institute with at least 7 years of assurance practice services. So earlier what was written is you should have at least 7 years of practicing experience, but now they have inserted what? Assurance. So you need to have 7 years of assurance practicing services. 7 years of assurance practice services experience. First condition. Second, it could be where you are not being able to fulfill the first condition, you then need to fulfill the second condition at least, that in case member has moved from industry to practice and is currently in practice, he should have at least 10 years of audit experience in the industry and at least 3 years of assurance experience in practice. So suppose you are not having 7 years of practicing assurance service, you are having 4 years. 4 years of practicing assurance services. You are having 4 years of experience. Then you also need to have 10 years of experience where you were sort of involved in the auditing service only. Suppose you were there in the big four as a partner or as a manager or as a director, you were there in the big four for 10 years, or any sort of engagement or any sort of industry where you were involved in the auditing services only. Getting this? So then if you are not having 7 years of practicing assurance experience, then you need to have at least 3 years plus and plus 10 years of industry experience in the auditing domain. Thirdly, you need to undergo the training as may be required by the institute, just like what we undergo, right? Just like we go after clearing IPCC, we undergo our training articleship, then we clear the examination final. Similarly, for you to become peer reviewer, you need to undergo the training, then you need to clear the peer review examination, then you will be a member of the PRB. You will be called you can be empaneled. You can be empaneled in the peer reviewers. You can get yourself empaneled under peer reviewers. So when you are getting yourself empaneled as a peer reviewer, you need to give a declaration at the time of empanelment, and also the declaration of the confidentiality that you will not be disclosing any sort of information that you might be receiving from the client. Right? So when you are reviewing the client, you will be getting a lot many information about their business model, about all the working papers of the institute, about all the working papers of the chartered accountants, about clients, about chartered accountants, all the confidential information that you might be getting it, you need not be disclosing. You have to not disclose the confidential information. You have to give the declaration. However, you will not be eligible to become a peer reviewer if any disciplinary action is pending against you, you have been found guilty of any other misconduct, you have been convicted of a competent court for an offense involving moral turpitude and being punished with imprisonment, you have any conflict of interest, you or your partner is being having any conflict of interest with the practicing unit. So suppose I I was a I me and Sagar was having a partnership earlier, and now suppose we have both separated. So earlier he was also the partner in my firm, so now I cannot be appointed as a peer reviewer to review the Sagar firm, because there could be a conflict of interest, could be a conflict of interest. Similarly, he has undergone training articleship under any of the partner of PU. Now suppose when me and Sagar were partner, Mehak came to articleship. Mehak came for articleship under us, and now Mehak has also become cleared her chartered accountancy firm. Now clearly, when she is being appointed as a peer reviewer, will she leave me? Will she leave me? She was article under me, so she will be pinpointing all sort of mistakes that I might have incurred. So since now she will be in full revenge mode, therefore institute considered my request and told that Mehak cannot be a peer reviewer. Any sort of article who was a reviewer or who was an article assistant in any of the partner of the firm cannot review. Cannot review. He has undergone a training or articleship under any of the partner of the practicing unit. Because you all know that articles will now be in the full revenge mood, right? Then peer reviewer shall not accept professional assignment. This is important. The MCQ generally comes from here, that once you have been appointed as a peer reviewer, then you should not have accepted any service from that firm before 2 years, and after 2 years also you cannot accept any sort of professional assignment from that firm. So CA bhai CA brothers, your brother CA cannot be of use now. After you have provided your peer review services, you cannot ask for 2 years any sort of professional assignment from him. And also before 2 years also you should not have accepted any sort of professional assignment from him. Then only you can do peer review here. Before 2 years, after 2 years, no professional assignment being accepted from the practicing unit. Clear? Are we clear with all the ineligibilities? Arnab, Arnab Goswami.
यस सर. सर वो टू थर्ड एंड सॉरी थोड़ा सर टू थर्ड एंड वन थर्ड वाला थोड़ा डाउट है सर. वहाँ पे सर टू थर्ड जो है दैट टू थर्ड इज कमिंग फ्रॉम द मेंबर हु इज constitute or selected by them in ICI or only the
Of
council?
all the total members 2/3. So suppose 2/3 total members you need to have. Suppose here out of 10 firms, you will select what? For these three and for suppose these two. And how much will the 2/3? 2/3 will what? 7, right? So suppose you select this also, and here 4 plus 3 7. So for these 7, you need to have maximum tenure of either 3 years or tenure end of your membership as a council member. So for these four, the another limit will be membership end of your council membership, tenure of your council membership. For these three, there won't be any other sort of limit, but for these three, there will be the limit of 3 years only. So from out of total members, you need to select 7 members who will be having this much tenure, maximum tenure. And for rest, these three, you can have other set of limits applied to them for the purpose of tenure.
But the council member is the below one, na? Not the first one. First one is a chartered accountant selected by the ICI, and second one is the council member elected by the council. So,
First one here, you are referring this, now this is first and this is second. So
first
I
one is
told these 5 are from council members, and these 5 are
okay.
from suppose Ministry of Corporate Affairs, the director from some other big company, corporate, or any sort of person who can be appointed in the peer review board. Peer review board is decided by whom? Is decided by council of the institute. So they will decide who can be the members in the peer review board. So they decided that yes, this Ministry Corporate Affairs one person can come from here. Chairperson of suppose Ministry of Finance could also join us if he is related to this field, peer review. So any sort of any other person, economist, chief economist, they can also appoint themselves. ठीक है?
Okay, now clear. Yeah.
Yeah, so break. Let's join at 7:20 then. Yeah, Dhanlakshmi. ठीक है? So we'll try to then finish off the other half of the chapter. 7:20.
Sir, please forward the updated version of the PDF,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah, yeah. I'll do after this session.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Hmm. So done with break. What did you all eat? Chaat, dahi puri, sev puri. I am in full Sunday mood. Chalo, qualified assistant. Till now, are we clear with everything? Peer reviewer, either 7 years of practicing assurance services. If not, then at least 3 years of work practicing assurance services plus 10 years of experience in industry in the auditing domain. Or other condition would be you need to get yourself all the trainings and then clear the examination to become a peer reviewer. Then you can empanel yourself. Okay, Maggie. Then you can get yourself empaneled as peer reviewer Dhanlakshmi after you have ate your Maggie. And but before that you need to give the declaration. What all declaration, Dhanlakshmi, tell me? Declaration that you will not start photocopying all the documents of the firm in which you are reviewing, right? So you will not start photocopying once you are done with all your peer review. The declaration of confidentiality and the declaration at the time of empanelment as a peer reviewer. Then a member shall not be eligible for being appointed as a reviewer if any disciplinary action is pending or he is being guilty under schedule or any sort of provisions of Chartered Accountant Act or convicted by a competent court involving moral turpitude or otherwise and being imprisoned. And then lastly, there is a conflict of interest among the partners of the firms in which you are getting yourself peer reviewed. Similarly, if Mehak was my article, then definitely I will not want Mehak to do my peer review. So institute also listened to me and told what article assistant who is already was doing an articleship in firm in under the partnership under the partner of any partner of the firm, then yeah, then she cannot do what peer review of that firm, right? And then lastly, cannot accept the professional assignment before 2 years and after 2 years of the peer review. Qualified assistant. So now who is the qualified assistant? Any changu mangu. You can take one changu mangu with you for the purpose of peer review. So you'll go to do the peer review, then definitely there will be a lot of work. Then you can bring along with you one changu mangu, but he shall be a chartered accountant and does not attract any of the disqualification under section 8 or under section 21 of the CA Act. Do you remember section 8 of Chartered Accountant Act? Chartered Accountant Act, do you remember section 8? First was Nandini, should be 21 years or above for you to become a member of the institute, else you will be disabled. Disability. Second was you if you are a undischarged insolvent. Third was if you are a discharged insolvent but you have not taken a certificate from the court that this insolvent, you did not become insolvent because of any misconduct, but rather there was certain disaster or any sort of mishappening that happened with you and that is why you become insolvent. Fourth point was what? Ha, unsound mind. पागल है लड़की पागल है, do you remember? And lastly, fifth point, section 8 clause 5, convicted of an offense, imprisoned offense, and if at all you have not being waived by the central government or by the institute, then you will be held guilty. In which clause? You will be held guilty under which clause? Clause 4 of part Clause 2 of part 4 of schedule 1, other misconduct, guilty of other misconduct. Do you remember there was a illustration in which they have mentioned that if you are being held guilty under clause 5 of section 8 clause 5, then you will be held guilty under where? Clause 2 of part 4 of schedule 1, other misconduct. So similarly they are here also saying what, that this one changu mangu that you are taking among with you, he should be a chartered accountant and should not be a disqualified under section 8 or section 21 of the Chartered Accountants Act 1949. Clear? Similarly, name shall be intimated to the peer review board and practicing unit before the commencement of the peer review. That means you will have to tell before the commencement of the peer review that I am coming along with Dhanlakshmi, that Dhanlakshmi will be my qualified assistant and I will be the peer reviewer. I'll have to tell to the peer review board before commencement of the peer review, and qualified assistant shall have to sign the declaration of confidentiality, as I also signed, right? I also signed the same declaration of confidentiality, and shall have no direct interference with the PU or the board. So Dhanlakshmi cannot have direct interface with the practicing unit, with the board. So any sort of communication that she might want to initiate, she'll be simply denied. Go send your peer reviewer, send Yash, right? So any sort of direct interface with the practicing unit or with the peer review board, she cannot have. And lastly, person chosen for assisting the reviewer shall be from the firm of the reviewer as a partner or paid assistant as per the records of the ICA. That means what? Then Lakshmi should belong from my firm as a partner or as my employee. She should be a chartered accountant. She should belong from my firm only as a partner or as an employee. Then only she could be my qualified assistant. Clear? Yes or no? Confidentiality. So homework, I now come out with a trick so that I ensure that you all will be revising something or the other. So I'll be giving you some homework so that you have to read this and understand it, and before reading also try to finish up what you already know, right? So confidentiality is a homework. Just come to this amendment part. Non-compliance with the secrecy provision shall amount to professional misconduct under section 22 of the Chartered Accountants Act, and also guilty under schedule 2 part 1 clause 1. Schedule 2 part 1 clause 1. Do you remember disclosure of confidential information? Secrecy provision, any sort of violation in secrecy provision, you will be held guilty under schedule 2 part 1 clause 1. Similarly, they are saying what a declaration of confidentiality, that is form 4, shall be signed by all the members of the peer review board and the board secretariat for office use. This is different from form 2 that we will see below in the peer review process. We'll come across form 2 versus form 4. That is different. Form 4 is for official purpose, for office use, that is they are signed by peer review boards, that is secretariat of the peer review board. And form 2 is to be signed by us as a peer reviewer. We have to sign what? Peer review confidentiality declaration under form 2. Are you getting the difference? In form 2, we as a peer reviewer are declaring under form 2 that we won't be disclosing any confidential information, and in form 4, who all are discussing, who all are declaring that they won't be disclosing any confidential information? All the members of the board and board secretariat. Board here means what? Peer review board. Now let's jump to approach of the reviewer. Approach of the reviewer. What shall be the approach? You can start with what? Engagement letter. You can start with engagement letter because we will come across the engagement letter definition as per SA 210. Engagement letter is what? They will specify the characteristics of the audit engagement, what all assets, expenses, liability, what all has to be audited in this engagement. Similarly, they will also tell the auditor responsibility, what are all the responsibility of the auditor. Similarly, what is the responsibility of the management responsibility, auditor responsibility, what is the format of the audit report. Similarly, in which form I will be receiving the financial statement. Everything has been clearly specified in the engagement letter and is signed by the management and is signed by the audit report, so that there is no conflict later on, so that there is no confusion later on that I had to also audit the liabilities, but that was not mentioned in the engagement letter, or it was mentioned in the engagement letter, I did not do that. What are all are my responsibilities, what is the responsibility of the management, all things has to be signed by both management and the auditor. So I can straight away start with the engagement letter and get an idea what is the scope of this audit. If at all I have to pick this audit for my peer review purpose, I need to first of all assess what all things are covered in this audit, what is the scope of the audit, either is it a tax audit, is it a statutory audit, or is it an internal audit, what is the scope of the audit, what is the responsibility, everything I'll get to know with the engagement letter. I can just simply start with what, picking up the engagement letters. Then I'll try to assess how much assurance engagement I should pick up for me to peer review the firm. For me to review your practicing unit, I need to, out of all the 150, suppose 150 audits that you have done, I will pick up 3-4 audits. I will pick up 3-4 audits for on a sampling basis. I'll pick up 3-4 audits on a per sampling basis to review. So how much assurance engagement? Either should I pick up 2? Should I pick up 4? Should I pick up 6? Number of assurance engagement to be selected requires professional judgment. That will depend purely and purely on my professional judgment. It will be, the decision will be depending on my professional judgment. Similarly, practicing unit can have certain policies and procedures. That's if at all, suppose any client comes to you, you are a chartered accountant professional being carrying out practicing chartered accountancy services, and now any client comes to you and straight away tells you that okay fine, do my audit, I'll be straight away giving you 10 lakh rupees for this audit. It's a small audit, I'll simply give you 10 lakh. Whether will you accept this audit engagement? Will you accept or not? Okay, Mehak is saying yes. Others?
Yes, sir.
So that is why there is SA 220. For you, institute knows how much money minded chartered accountants are, right? So for that purpose they have issued SA 220, and they clearly tells that before acceptance of audit you need to perform certain procedures to assess the client. Integrity of the client has to be assessed. You need to assess how much big is the client. Are we capable enough to do the audit of that much that big client? Suppose Reliance comes in front of you to perform the audit, and you have only 50 staff, 10 staff, 20 staffs, and then will you be able to do the audit? How much is your capability? How much is the integrity of the client? Whether the client is true, capable enough. Similarly, everything has to be seen. Am I independent of the client or not? Am I independent? I should be independent also, na, right? For me to avoid any sort of objectivity or any sort of unbiasedness or any sort of biasness, I should also be independent of the client. Everything has to be seen. So SA 220 clearly tells you that these all points have to be checked before acceptance of the engagement or before continuing of the engagement. And therefore, practicing unit as a peer reviewer, we will check whether practicing unit is complying with those policies and procedures or not, as envisaged under SQC1 or as envisaged under SA 220 or as envisaged by their policies or procedure, what they have mentioned in their policies, that they will accept the audit once they have checklisted all these points. Clear? So PU may have policies and procedure for accepting particular engagement. Reviewer should check that this policy procedure have been complied with or not. And then reviewer may also follow mix of compliance procedure and mix of substantive procedure. So what do you mean by compliance procedure? What do you mean by substantive procedure? Anyone? IPCC basic audit knowledge. Yes, compliance procedure and substantive procedure. Do you remember this? Yes or no? So this test of control is called what? Compliance procedure. So before accepting audit, I'll just quickly brief you what is our audit procedure. Audit procedure can be divided in two parts. One is risk assessment procedure and the other is further audit procedure. So firstly, in risk assessment procedure, we will try to understand the entity, understand or walk through the process of the entity. How is the purchase carried on? How is the sale made? Everything has to be assessed. You will also check the environment of the entity in which it is operating, laws and regulation that is applied to the entity, all the accounting standard or all the mandatory laws, regulation, requirement, everything that is applied, what all risk, inherent risk is there in the entity, everything you will perform, and accordingly based on the professional judgment that you found, how much risk is there. Risk we saw here is inherent risk and control risk. What we check in the risk assessment procedure is inherent risk and control risk, and if it is if it is a lot of inherent or control risk is a lot, then we'll do what? We will try to increase our further audit procedure so that we are able to detect a lot of misstatements. So in order to reduce our detection risk is what? That you will not be able to detect the misstatement. You will not be able to detect material misstatement. So in order to reduce this, you will have to increase your further audit procedure. You will have to perform more and more procedures. You will have to take out more and more samples. So you will increase your further audit procedure in order to decrease your detection risk, or I can say in order to detect more and more material misstatement. No such material misstatement should be avoided or should be left, right? So in order to decrease detection risk, we will increase our further audit procedure based on our professional judgment. And what all things are included in FAP? One we will do is test of controls. That means what? To check whether the controls are effective or not. The controls that we have implemented, whether they are operating effectively or not, and that is what is called as compliance procedure. Here we only check controls, internal controls. We'll come across this terminology again, chapter 3, chapter 4. Internal controls are what? Controls implemented within the procedures of the entity. Suppose P2P procedure. Suppose this is P2P procedure, where there is a big procedure that first of all we will see whether the material is required or not. Then material requisition note is prepared. Then material requisition note is prepared. Then it is sent for purchase order. Purchase order is then we have to check whether at least 3% applied for this purchase order or not. Then gone with the have we gone with the order which has quoted the minimum price? Or if not, what is the reason for accepting the price which is higher than the minimum? Then it will go to invoicing. Then it will go to quality check. Then it will go to again accounts payable department, everything, cash department, everything. This P2P process entirely will be carried out for the purchase of any material or procedure. So between each process there will be a material. Suppose there will be lot many controls. One could be example of maker checker control. That means if a material requisition note is prepared by someone, then it should be tested by or checked by some other person. Similarly, this PO, I told you so many controls, right? That at least you should receive 3 quotation. You should accept the minimum price quotation. If you are not accepting minimum, if you are accepting price above than the quotation, then you should also tell the reason for the same. These are all what? Controls are for what? Controls are what? Being implemented. But we have to check whether if at all they are being implemented, they are operating effectively or not. We have to check whether they are operating properly or not in the test of control procedure. And similarly, in the substantive procedure, we perform in-depth audit procedures to check in-depth everything, documentation, everything has to be done in-depth. That is test of details of transaction. The transaction is being tested with details of all the audit procedures, and also with analytical procedure. That means comparing it with last year figures, comparing it with previous ratios. These are what your analytical procedure as per SA 520. These are all audit procedure. Now similarly, pay attention. It is what saying, they are also saying what reviewer may follow mix of compliance and substantive procedure. So they are saying that you can also follow mix of compliance and substantive procedure. So in the case of a peer reviewer, when we are going to review practicing units policies and procedures, what could be the compliance procedure? We will check whatever the policies and procedures that they have mentioned in their form. Suppose they have mentioned that we will accept the audit only when their integrity mentioned checklist is fulfilled, we are independent of the entity, we are capable enough to do the audit of the entity. These all checklists they are mentioned in the policies and procedure. We will simply check whether these policies and procedures have been complied with or not. This is what a compliance procedure. Similarly, substantive procedure will be going through each and every documentation that the CA firm has created for all the procedure that the CA firm has performed. That is, PU might have done the audit. They have done the audit and they would have done auditing accordance documentation based on SA 230. So we will go through in depth all these documentations that the PU has created. That is in depth test of detail or substantive procedures. So that is what they have said. For compliance test, reviewer may check policies and procedure of PU are sufficient to ensure the compliance of PET. Are they PP sufficient enough to check the compliance of the PET? And similarly, for substantive test, reviewer will go into the in-depth all the working papers of the PU. All the working papers of the PU, adequately documentation have been done by the PU or not. Adequate documentation, adequate working paper, and the findings and conclusion have been documented or not. Clear? A mix of compliance and substantive procedure. Are we clear? We will go through this substantive procedure, compliance procedure once again in SA 330, SA 300 series in chapter 3. Don't worry about that part. But if you could just get this part, mix of compliance and substantive procedure in the case of peer review. Yes, any doubt?
Sir, in this case, auditor can share the working paper with the peer reviewer. It is allowed, right? Means
Auditor, yeah. Auditor has to give the working papers or documents to the reviewer, but it's not like it will be used by the peer reviewer. It will be examined actually, and that is required by law, mandated by law, right? And it will not become the property of the peer reviewer. Now coming on to the next point, obligation of the practicing unit. What all obligation do you think if I am coming for review? Dhanlakshmi, what is your obligation? If I am coming as a peer reviewer to review your firm, what do you think is your
Sir, but I am
obligation?
your assistant now, reviewer
Okay,
assistant.
uh, ठीक है. So what do you think as an assistant when we are going to review our client, to review our practicing unit? What is the expectation of you that the practicing unit should be coming out with these much duties? Don't tell me Maggie. They should at least offer you Maggie.
No, sir, they should at least coordinate with us.
Yeah. Any sort
And
of information
whatever we
that
are
you require.
asking for, any kind of any documents or anything, they should provide with the same.
Yeah. Any sort of assistance that you require, you should get that. Any sort of documentation you want, you should get that. Similarly, any sort of doubt that you might arrive at, then you should also be able to get it clarified from your practicing unit. They should be able to clarify that. So that is what I have just simply mentioned this. All document access should be provided, all the explanation should be clarified, all the assistance and all the translation that needs to be carried out. In case the financial statement are not in English or any sort of other documentation work which is not in your language, you need to translate it, then it should be performed. This is the exam question of December 21. December 21 exam question. Documents access, explanation, assistance, translation. Okay, if you want, you can try to learn like this as well. Date, D for document access, A for assistance, T for translation, E for explanation. Document access, assistance, T for translation, E for explanations. Now, what do you think is our obligations, our duty? First of all, we should not start doing all the photocopies, right? Do you remember declaration of confidentiality? We are also reviewing and stream at the same time. I'm also telling Dhanlakshmi that start photocopying all the working papers. Okay, so reviewer shall not take extracts of the practicing unit's client's file records examined by him as a part of his working paper. Similarly, reviewer shall complete the review in prescribed time and submit the report to the PRB. So prescribed time, we'll see that the prescribed time is what for existing firm it is 20 days, and for new unit the peer review has to be done in 7 days or 6 days. I don't exactly remember, but it's 20 or 7 days. So we have to submit the report in the prescribed time and shall document all our working papers and submit the copy to the board PRB. And now when we have submitted the information and report, peer review report, right? Peer review report, we have submitted it through PRB. Now board might ask further information or explanation if at all they are not able to comprehend from the report that we have submitted, right? So if at all they want any other further information, then they can ask within 18 months from the date of submission of the peer review report. So our next point is peer review process. What should be the process? And in a way, I have summarized first step and this second step, peer review procedure to be followed by the peer reviewer, and procedure for initiating peer review. These two steps I have tried to summarize this. So we'll just go through this chart. I'll also share this in your Telegram group. Let's just first try to see it from here itself. So practicing unit, first of all, it will submit in the first step. This is the first step. Form 1. Form 1, they will file Form 1 with PRB. Practicing unit will file with what? PRB. Yeah. So practicing unit will file Form 1 with PRB, and that is called as ACQ, application cum questionnaire. So Form 1 they will apply to PRB asking what? Asking to get themselves peer reviewed. They want to get themselves peer reviewed, so they will apply to PRB in Form 1 and trying to tell them that they want to get themselves peer reviewed. PRB in step 2, you see, you can say that PRB will give them 3 reviewers. PRB will give them 3 options. One is Yash, the other could be Nupur, and the third could be Pooja. So these 3 options you have. Please choose your peer reviewer. Please choose your peer reviewer. The PRB will send these 3 options within 3 working days. So 3 options, 3 working days time PRB has. Now, once the PRB has sent 3 options within 3 working days, we have now only 1 working day to opt for the peer reviewer. We have now 1 working day left to opt for the peer reviewer. So out of the 3, they will select 1 and intimate this within 1 working day of the receipt of the name of the 3 peer reviewers. So once we have received the 3 peer reviewers name, we have 1 day, 1 working day. Within 1 working day, we have to select and intimate to the peer review board back with the peer reviewer that we want, right? Now peer review board in the 4th step will intimate the selection to the peer reviewer. So suppose Nupur was selected for the peer reviewer. Now PRB will tell Nupur that you have been appointed to review the firm of Suneshwaran. To review the firm of Suneshwaran, they will intimate the selection of the peer review to the peer reviewer. Peer reviewer. Now in the 5th step, peer reviewer will submit the declaration of confidentiality in Form 2. Remember Form 2 versus Form 4, I told you to differentiate Form 2 versus Form 4. So Form 4, the declaration of confidentiality. Form 4, the declaration of confidentiality is signed by PRB and the Secretariat of the PRB. Secretariat of the PRB. But Form 2 is submitted by whom? Form 2 is submitted by the peer reviewer. That is also declaration of confidentiality. But Form 4 is for office purpose and Form 2 is for this declaration of confidentiality to be given by peer reviewer. And this has to be given within 2 working days of the receipt of choice of the peer reviewer's name. So getting this is so much easy to remember the working days and form. So first was Form 1, that is what ACQ. Second is 3 working days, 3 reviewers name. 3 reviewers name, so their PRB has how many days? 3 working days. Similarly, for us to give in Form 2, declaration of confidentiality in Form 2, we have how many days? 2 working days. Form 2, 2 working days. Clear? 3 reviewers, 3 reviewer name suggestion, 3 working days PRB has. And for us, peer reviewer will have 2 working days to submit Form 2. To submit Form 2, we have how many days? 2 working days. Now we'll submit this to practicing unit, the declaration of confidentiality. And the same copy of your application cum questionnaire, that is Form 1. This Form 1 copy will be sent within 2 working days of the appointment to the peer reviewer by the practicing unit. Are you getting this, the entire flow? Again, we can just revise it again. Form 1 or the first step, Form 1 ACQ will be given by the practicing unit to the PRB that they want to get their firm peer reviewed. Now PRB has 3 working days to give 3 peer reviewers suggestion name to the practicing unit. Practicing unit out of these 3 names will select one and submit it to PRB again within 1 working day. Now PRB will intimate the peer reviewer that you have been appointed as a peer reviewer of this practicing unit. Now after this intimation of selection, we have 2 working days to submit Form 2, and the copy of this Form 1 will be filed by the PU within 2 working days of the appointment with the peer reviewer. Clear? Are we clear? So you can just go through this 7 point Quickly go through these 7 points. Have we covered all the points in our chart? Quickly go through these 7 points. Very, very important for MCQ. These are new set of time limits. Earlier they were different. These are new time limits. You will definitely see an MCQ from here for sure. Now second step, that is our procedure to be followed by the peer reviewer. Now that we are peer reviewer has obtained what? This copy of ACQ form 1. Within 2 working days we have obtained what? Form 1, right, from the practicing unit. So now peer reviewer, after we have received all the information in form 1, and within now 2 working days we have to intimate to the practicing unit and also intimate to the PRB. We have to intimate both to the practicing unit and to the peer review board of the proposed visit and samples, that we will tell practicing unit and the PRB that we are gonna visit your firm office and we are gonna take 4 or 5 samples out of the entire audits that you have done. We have to intimate the same to the practicing unit. Clear? This will be intimation will be done in form 5. This intimation will be done in form 5. Plus 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 plus. You may also seek any additional or further clarification that you might not have received from here. You might not have received from here. You may seek any further clarification in form 6 from the practicing unit. So peer reviewer can seek any further clarification in form 6 by filing form 6 with the practicing unit, and practicing unit will then have to provide all this additional information within 1 working day. No much time available with the PU, because earlier what used to happen was practicing peer review was elongated, stretched for months and months. So now they strictly want practicing unit and the peer reviewers to adhere to the guidelines or the timelines and stick to it and complete the entire peer review process, as I told you, within 20 days in the case of existing unit, and in the case of new unit, new PU, new practicing unit, within 7 days. So this is what is our step. Now that practicing unit will has provided all the additional information, we are now having everything with us, all the additional information that we seek for. Now the peer reviewer will plan this on-site visit, on-site review, and me and Dhanlakshmi will intimate the practicing unit at least 2 working days before that, yes, we are gonna visit the practicing unit. We are gonna intimate the practicing unit that we are going to conduct on-site review. We are gonna visit your office. So please be prepared with Maggie for Dhanlakshmi and samosa with for me before we start conducting the review. So we have to intimate them in advance, right? Then only they will be prepared. Prepared with what? Not Maggie. Prepared with documents, every documentations and files, right? So that's why prior intimation is necessary before 2 days. 2 days at least prior, 2 days prior intimation will be required to be intimated to the practicing unit that yes, we are gonna on-site review, and this on-site review can be for maximum to maximum 6 working days. So Dhanlakshmi, you have 6 days to fulfill your appetite, and I have 6 days for my samosas. Now in case of new unit, you have only 1 working day, Dhanlakshmi. Clear? So for existing unit, that means what? This practicing unit is not coming under the purview of new unit. Do you remember the definition of new unit? What was the definition of new unit? That from the date of incorporation of the firm, it is not yet, 1 year has not yet elapsed. 1 year has not yet elapsed, or even if it is elapsed, but you still now not get given any sort of assurance services, assurance services, right? So if it is in the case of new unit, maximum 1 working day it should take for you to on-site review, and in case of new in case of existing unit, maximum 6 working days. Okay. And then practicing unit and the peer reviewer shall also ensure that entire review process is completed in 20 working days for the existing practicing unit. I told you, for existing practicing units we have maximum 20 working days to complete the entire peer review process. In the case of new unit, we have how many days? 7 working days. And these working days will start from receipt of application by the peer practicing unit for notifying the peer review board for PRB, for peer review. So it will start from the receipt of application by practicing unit or from notifying practicing unit of their selection. So 20 days will start from there or 7 days will start from there. Any doubt? Any doubt in this second step? Quickly go through this 7 points again. Quickly go through this 7 points again fast. So now let's come to now the execution part. So this I have already told you. On-site review can be for maximum 6 working days for existing unit, and for new unit it can be for maximum how many days on-site review?
1 day.
One working, 1 day.
One
Now
day.
compliance review general controls. So following controls require compliance review for evaluating degree of reliance to be placed on them for effective review. So now that we will be performing both procedures, right? Do you remember compliance and substantive procedures? So for a compliance procedure, we need to have reliance on these procedures. For this to be effective, for this compliance procedure to be effective, we need to first ensure that whether these policies and procedures are adequate, are they sufficient enough? Just like I'll tell you in the risk assessment procedure and in the further audit procedure. In the further audit procedure, we had what test of controls. So in the test of controls, we see what whether the controls are implemented effectively or not, whether they are operating effectively or not. Operating effectiveness, we check only what operating effectiveness. Whether they are adequate enough or not, that we don't check. That we see in the RAP whether the control that we have implemented are they adequate enough to mitigate the risk, are they adequate enough or they sufficient enough to control to reduce the control risk, that we check in the RAP. Inherent risk, control risk, what are the control risks, are the controls sufficient enough? Once the controls are sufficient, we check whether they are operating effectively or not. Even if they are adequate, it can be a circumstance where they are or not operating. We have went for what maker checker system, but maker is only getting, maker is the only one who is getting who is reviewing the or who is checking the documents, right? So there is no proper followance of the maker checker system, and that's why it could be what non-operational effectiveness, or you could say non-effectiveness of the operating procedures of the internal control. Similarly, for us to rely on this compliance review general controls, we need to first review what are the compliance procedure or the policies and procedures. Are they adequate enough? Then we will check that whether the firm is following the policies or procedures or not. So whether the policies and procedures being followed or not, that is secondary. But first we will check what whether they are adequate enough or not to reduce the risk. So we'll do what? We'll check the independence. We'll check maintenance of professional skills and standards are being maintained or not. Outside consultation. Do we just simply go with our intuition? Or if at all, say suppose I am not aware about any sort of information, then can I outside consult anyone else? You must have gone through SA 620, right? Expert, using the work of expert. So are we taking outside consultation or not? If yes, then what is the procedure for this? Staff recruitment, how are we recruiting our staff? Supervision, promotion, development of the staff. And lastly, how are we administrating our office? All these are related to what your internal controls of your CA firm. Mechanism, standards on quality control, SQC, policies and procedures. And therefore, that what we need to first assess. Are they adequate enough or not? And you can just simply check if this question comes, then the question can be controls require compliance review for evaluating degree of reliance to be placed on them. So what will you check for this? So we'll check independence, maintenance of professional skills, outside consultation, staff recruitment, supervision, office administration, and you can just simply learn through the empty disco. D for development of staff. I for independence. S for standards. C for consultation. and O for office administration. Now selection of assurance service engagement for review. So how many number of engagements you will select for you to review the peer practicing unit? For you to complete the peer review process, how many number of engagements will you select? So that will depend basically on SQCs which is generally prevailing in the firm. So standard on quality control, how much effective it is in the firm. If you already know if the test of control result is positive, that means what? If controls are properly maintained, implemented, effectively operating, then will we perform more substantive procedures or less substantive procedure? We will perform less, right? Because already controls are operating. Similarly, that will depend on SQC generally prevailing. If the SQC which is prevailing generally are very well educated, documented, properly being followed, then the number of selection for audit engagement in our peer review process will be less. Similarly, size and nature of the engagement. If the size is big enough, then automatically the number of engagement will be less. If we are selecting small engagements, then the number of engagements will be more. Methods adopted for practicing unit in providing assurance services. What the methods are adopted by the PU. Similarly, number of partners or members which is involved in that particular engagement. So if at all suppose I got one engagement in which three partners are already or already involved, and I got one more engagement in which only one partner was involved, then I selected this engagement, then I might select instead of five more engagement, I might select only three more engagements, because I already selected one engagement in which three partners are involved. Thereby I will be evaluating three partners in one engagement, the work carried out by three partners in a single engagement. Similarly, the number of location branch offices that the practicing unit has. So if they have more number of branches, more number of locations, they are operating in further many more locations, then we'll have to maybe increase our number of samples, number of audit engagements. Clear? This is important. This can come for 5 mark or 4 mark question. How will you select? How will you determine how many number of engagements you have to review? How will you select? That can be asked. Okay. This for new unit I've already told you. Just go through this and go through this review of records, compliance and substantive approach. Just go through this once. I'll once again visit point number 5, but please before that read point 5 and point 4. If at all like they ask one question, they can ask you one question: what all areas you will consider while you are following compliance approach? When you are reviewing the firm with your compliance approach, what all areas will you consider? Areas to be considered while applying the assurance service engagement, while reviewing the assurance services engagement through compliance approach. So we have to check that the audit is being performed as per professional ethical technical standards. For this purpose, we will check these areas that will be considered. Assurance service recorded for administration. That is all the administration records we will check. These all areas we will consider. Assurance service conclusions that we have formed. Similarly, reporting area we will see go through. Review or evaluation of ICS internal control system, we will once go through that as well. And substantive tests being performed or any sort of presentation and disclosure. There's all these areas we will go through, whether the CA firm is going through all these points or not in your compliance approach. So you can just simply try to recollect all these points here. Financial statement, there has to be implemented internal control system so that financial statement is prepared in accordance with all material is prepared in accordance with applicable accounting standards, right? Then so for financial statement I have to ensure what internal control system. In internal control system I will check what test of control. In test of control I found there are certain deficiencies in admin control, and therefore I concluded that I will report this in my internal audit report. So we'll try to recollect all the points. Clear? Now let's again come to reporting part. Reporting by the peer reviewer. Reporting. Now once we have done with all the review procedures, everything we are done with it, we are now available with our opinion whether the firm or the PU is complying with all the quality control standard, whether they are following the documentation procedure that needs to be followed, whether they are complying with the professional, ethical or technical standards or not. Everything has to be reported. So peer reviewer will, with its preliminary report, draft sort of report, issued to the practicing unit. So in its preliminary report, they will report all the findings that they got in the case of practicing unit, all the deficiencies that they got, and all the clarifications that they want from the practicing unit. Any sort of other further clarification that they might require from the practicing unit, all this will be communicated by the peer reviewer to the practicing unit, and practicing unit has to reply within 2 working days. Has to reply to the reviewer on the preliminary report within 2 working days. What all things can be considered in the preliminary report? All your doubts, clarification that you require, all the deficiencies that you came encounter with and right, and the findings that you encountered. Now that the peer reviewer is available with its reply of the practicing unit, I am now with available with what? Reply of the practicing unit. Within 2 working days, PU has to reply to the peer reviewer, right? So now peer reviewer will either be satisfied with the reply or will not be satisfied. Correct? Either can happen, either of the two. Either he'll be satisfied or he won't be satisfied with the reply. If satisfied, then I will simply issue unmodified report. Unmodified report, that means no modification. Peer review is done away with. So submit the unmodified report and initial findings along with the response from the practicing unit. So the findings that you send here na, to the practicing unit, all these findings, you will also enclose these findings. You will also enclose these findings and the response that you received from the practicing unit, you will also enclose this response to be submitted to the practicing unit and to the PRB, that is peer review board. Clear? So all the clarifications that you got from the practicing unit, all the responses that you received, all the findings that you communicated, everything will be attached when you are submitting it to the PRB, peer review board, and the same copy shall be submitted to the practicing unit. Now PRB will issue the peer review certificate along with the validity. Are we clear? PRB will submit what? Peer review certificate along with the validity, which I told you, which Mehak asked, was what? Shall not exceed 3 years. Now suppose I am not satisfied. Now suppose I am not satisfied with this. So I'll issue what? Modified report, qualified report. Reasons. Also, I yesterday also we saw what? If at all you are modifying the report because of non-compliance of any standards, then you cannot simply plainly modify. You have to also provide for the reasons for such modification. Do you remember this? Do you remember? We have to also provide with what? Reasons for such modification. Similarly, all the initial findings and the responses that you receive from the practice unit, everything will have to be reported to the PRB and to the PU. And you will also mention that this review process is not yet completed because of what? Because of that you are not satisfied with the reply, na? You are not satisfied with the reply. This is a qualified report being issued. Qualified report. That means what? Although peer review is done, but they cannot issue peer review certificate to them, as that would be a justifiable procedure, right? Because other firms who have completed their peer review process with no qualification are getting peer review certificate. So you should not be getting the peer review certificate unless you are full-fledged complying with all guidelines, rules, regulation, SQC1, SA 220, or other standards on audit, technical standard, professional standard, ethical standard, everything. So they will now allow you to do the same, but after a follow-on review, either after 1 year, or this 1 year could also be reduced to 6 months if the council deem fit. So follow-on review has to happen, and if you pass this follow-on review, then only you will be issued what? Peer review certificate. So follow-on review has to happen. Clear? And also we'll inform to the practicing unit that we cannot issue the peer review certificate because you have not complied with all the guidelines, rules, regulation requirements, and therefore we have mentioned here what? Due date of follow-on review. So you have to come, we will again review you, we will again peer review you what? On the follow-on date, and we'll check whether you are now improved or not, and accordingly issue the peer review certificate. Clear? Yes or no? So all this you can just go through this point reporting wala. पूरा reporting का point chart to reporting by the peer reviewer. Just go through this with this point as well. Form 9 till here. Just go through the points till here. So yes, are you done? So let's come to now peer review certificate. So as I told you earlier, there is one important point here, although this is in an amended point. Okay, clear? Peer review certificate entire point is new. So one important point here is to be noted is that peer reviewer will confirm the fee received from the practicing unit first and then only issue the peer review certificate. That means what? If me and Lakshmi has done the peer review of Pooja and associates, then Pooja and associates will first pay the fees to us and then only we will send the peer review certificate. So, in case of an unqualified report issued by the PRR, the PRB secretary shall place the report before the PRB audit subcommittee for consideration and issuance of the PRC. That means peer review certificate will be issued, but only and only after Pooja has paid or confirmed the fee receipt. We have to confirm the fee receipt from the PU that we have received the fee. Don't worry. Then PRB will issue the peer review certificate to you. PRB will issue the peer review certificate, which will be duly signed by the chairman, vice chairman, and the secretary, mentioning the validity period. And this shall be served upon whom? Served upon the, of course, practicing unit. They will be served with what? Served with PRC certificate. And will PRB secretary will also update what? The number of firms who are currently peer reviewed. They will update the number of list of firms who have themselves get themselves peer reviewed. Similarly, in the case of qualified report being issued by the reviewer and has been considered by the board, then the secretary shall also inform the practicing unit that peer review certificate cannot be issued to you now because of the qualification, and there will be a follow-on review that we will mention on a due date. There will be a follow-on review. Clear? Now, validity of peer review, as I told you earlier, in order for you to avoid any sort of discomfortness, they have recommended that before the validity expires, 1 month before that, you should try to get yourself again peer reviewed. You should try again to get yourself peer reviewed, because anyway peer review for maximum 20 days it will be over, right? So within 1 month, if you apply again 1 month before the expiry of the tenure of the validity of the certificate, before 1 month you should apply for your peer review certificate again. You should get yourself peer reviewed again, so that any audits being performed you by in between the validity expired and between the new PRC, it should not be null and void, right? So for that, they recommend they complete 1 month before the expiry. You have to get yourself peer reviewed within 1 month before expiry. And the PRC issued to practicing unit shall be having a validity of a period not exceeding 3 years, or maybe having such other period as may be decided by the PRB. If exceeding 3 years, that has to be decided by board from the date of receipt of the peer review report by the board. And important for new units, this validity will definitely and always be determined by the PRB. Okay, it cannot be simply 3 years. Has to be decided by the PRB. Extension, yes, the council for such reason has been prescribed. Of course, definitely can ask the we can ask the extension of the validity of the existing peer review certificate granted to us, right? The PU shall make an application in Form 8. 8 for extension. Form 8, 8 for extension. How can you remember this? Validity extension. Validity also, they are having 8 letters, right? Similarly, in extension also there are 8 letters only. Extension. Form 8 extension, validity extension. Just remember that. So we are done with what? Peer review process.
But said extension will not exceed 3 years.
Extension after 3 years or whatever your due date is, or whatever whenever your validity is expiring, you can just simply apply for extension. If the board wants to allow, or if they deem fit that yes, you are eligible, then yes, they will allow you, even if it is exceeding 3 years or exceeding your due date of your validity which is expiring. So they can extend this certificate. Now comes inherent limitation, and lastly difference between PR and QR. So let's just quickly complete this difference between PR and QR as a homework, because I have already told you. Peer review board is constituted by ICI. Quality review board is constituted by central government. The aim is different. The aim in the quality review board is to identify the deficiencies, to identify why the fraud was not detected by you, and to act upon the same. They will definitely take disciplinary action. They will be taking disciplinary action against the firm which was not able to act upon the audit procedures. But in the peer review, the aim is not to identify the deficiencies, but in order to improve upon the processes or improve upon the systems of the CA firm, PU. Correct? So that is what you can see the difference here. Peer review and quality review, that is your homework. Let's just come to strictly our last point, that is inherent limitation of peer review. Inherent limitation of peer review. So what do you think? Is this peer review guidelines 2022, is it some sort of Gita of Mahabharat, or is it some sort of Bible that everything mentioned in here is correct, absolutely 100% foolproof, true? No, right? It's just a statement. Reviewer will conduct the review according to what? According to statement only, according to peer review guidelines, as per peer review. And you cannot be ensured of this fact that whatever procedures being followed through following these peer review guidelines will be 100% sure. So there is definitely inherent limitation in the peer review guidelines, and this guidelines is not 100% correct as well, right? Definitely this is an ongoing continuous process, improvement process. Everything gets improved over the period of time. So now the book what you see, this book also is improving over the period of time. It improved to arrive at this juncture. Similarly it will improve further. Similarly the peer review guidelines, it will improve upon and upon again and again. And what is mentioned right now, the review procedure being performed through peer review guidelines, is not 100% foolproof. Now tell me, the first point is over, right? Clear everyone? It's not a Gita, it's not a Bible, it's not a Granth. Peer review guidelines, that is what is our first point, inherent limitation of peer review. Second point, what do you think? What are we reviewing here? Peer review. In the peer review, what are we reviewing? Tell me.
Policies and procedures.
Policies and procedures, standards on quality controls, right? So, do you think these quality control standards or procedures, they will be foolproof of any sort of limitations? No. What we are reviewing, they itself have inherent limitations. So, definitely our review procedure will also have inherent limitation, right? Even if we have reviewed it 100%, still there are inherent limitation in the policies, procedures, definitely quality control standard. So the review would not necessarily disclose all weaknesses. No, come to this third point. Sorry, come to this third point. As there are inherent limitation in the effectiveness of the quality control system, the system which you are reviewing, they itself has got the what? Inherent limitation, which happens to be the subject matter of the review. What is the subject matter of our review? This quality control standard, and they themselves has the inherent limitation. So definitely our review process will also be having what? Inherent limitation. Correct? And the second point is nothing but very much simple, that out of all the 150 audit assignment, we are following what? Sampling. So definitely because of the sampling, there are bound to happen some inherent limitation will be there, right? It's not an absolute assurance, reasonable assurance based on sampling procedure that we are following. So first point, it is not a Bible, it is not a Granth, it is just a statement of peer review. Second point, it is done on sampling basis, so not an absolute assurance can be given. Third point, the subject matter of the review, it's itself having a inherent limitation, right? So definitely the review process will be having what? Inherent limitation as well. Everyone clear? With this peer review, we are done with one of the important chapter of the peer review that will surely be asked for 4 to 5 marks. It's an amended chapter as well, amended in May 23, and is also an important. Till now, they have asked for 4 to 5 marks, except for last to last attempt where they asked for quality review and not from peer review. So if you ask me, out of 10 attempts, 2 attempts, they definitely ask from peer review. But they definitely, out of 10 attempts, 8 attempts, they will ask from peer review. In 2 or 3 attempts, they can ask from quality review. But quality review is also very important, since I told you what, that is also been amended. So we'll do that tomorrow. We'll be uh, discussing test paper later part, or maybe in night, or maybe in the later part of the class. We'll be having not more than 2 hour session tomorrow. ठीक है? And day after tomorrow also we'll might be having 1 to 1.5 hour session, and then you will be giving test on professional ethics. ठीक है? चलो फिर
सर
with
एक डाउट था
yes.
सर, जैसे इसमें ये एलिजिबिलिटी थी मेंबर्स के लिए, मतलब जो पीयर रिव्यूअर मेंबर रहेगा, और क्वालिफाइड असिस्टेंट के लिए अलग एलिजिबिलिटी थी, तो वो उसके एक्सटेंशन थे कि वो डिफरेंटली मतलब अलग चीज है दोनों?
क्या क्या लास्ट में क्या बोले तुमने?
क्वालिफाइड असिस्टेंट के लिए कुछ अलग एलिजिबिलिटीज थी,
हाँ
और जो मेन मेंबर था, मतलब जो पीयर रिव्यूअर रहेगा, उसकी अलग एलिजिबिलिटीज थी। तो वो एक मतलब दोनों की एलिजिबिलिटी अलग अलग है कि फर्स्ट वाले के एक्सटेंशन में ये
नहीं
क्वालिफाइड
अलग
असिस्टेंट?
अलग है ना. क्वालिफाइड असिस्टेंट जस्ट ओनली नीड टू बी अ चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट and need to be a partner or employee of your firm, but the peer reviewer has to be empaneled with the PRB. peer reviewer को peer review board में empaneled होना पड़ेगा so as to do the peer review of the PU. अगर कोई empaneled ही नहीं, वही practicing जो qualified assistant है, he might not be empaneled, but still you can take him with you as a qualified assistant if it is he is a chartered accountant and is with your firm only as an employee or a partner or employee. He need not be empaneled with the peer. So what the conditions that we saw in the peer reviewer, that are the conditions for you to get yourself empaneled, for you to carry out the peer review process, for you to now start accepting the review assignments that will be forwarded to you by the panel, definitely, right?
थैंक यू सर।
Sir, I have one. Sir, can you stop recording? I have one question. Like, sir, compositions of that your peer review. Can you come again?
Okay,
Because network issues. At time.
composition, yeah.
So, sir, council. You mean council is the ICI, right? Or MC? What you told after that, I could not
Council
listen
means
that time.
ICI council. There are
Okay.
council of ICI only.
Okay. So from council there will be at least 50% member, and other from industry there will be 50%, and vice chairman or chairman should be from the 50% of which ICI has selected.
Council members, yeah. And it need
Yeah,
not
from
be like 50-50, it can be more than equal to 50%, it could
more
be
than
even
50.
100% as well, but at least 50% should be from council, since this peer review board is the constitution of council only, right? It's constituted by ICI. So these members should be ICI members, should be from should form part of majority part of this PRB.
But sir, why the question like expirations of the council membership? How this come? Because CA membership is continuation, right? It's
No,
until
council membership is different and CA membership is different.
okay,
Council member, you to be, see, I am a chartered accountant, but am I a council member? No, hardly few of chartered accountants are council member. CCM, have you heard about this CCMs, central council members, or the president? They might have once be council members. Then after gaining reputation over the period, they will then be getting themselves nominated for the election of president or for the election of vice president, and then they might get themselves appointed as president. But before that, you need to be a member, you need to be associated with the institute, you need to carry out all the voluntary services and everything, you need to participate. Then you need can be a member, council of ICI, council member.
okay, sir, got it.
Even
Sir,
in,
one out. Yeah.
yeah,
Yes, sir, got it. Sir, one out of context question. Sir, what is the fees structures that PU has to pay for peer review to be conducted?
fee structure is not much. That what when I was in my articleship, my firm what got peer reviewed, and there the limit was not at all followed. It was like the limit was at that time 90 days. The review process should be completed, but it was like for more than 5 to 6 months. I was following on with them. The fee structure I remembered was the invoice was for 50, 40, 50 around.
Okay, sir. Thank you,
Yeah.
sir.